Welcome back to Sports Talk ATL. I am Chase Earl, joined by Jake Gordon and Alex Lord. The Falcons had their first real surprising cut of this entire training camp, offseason, whatever you want to call it, after just one preseason game, which Mykal Walker got a lot of reps in. He has been cut, a former fourth-round pick out of Fresno State that a lot of people were high on. Thought he was kind of a sleeper that the Falcons picked up. He had some moments, especially, a couple pick sixes, stuff like that. Made some plays, but overall, he was a liability against both the pass and the run. And I think, Alex, you talked about in a lot of your articles, like this is a new regime. This is a new defensive coordinator. Guys that you might think from the last regime that are safe because they were higher draft picks and stuff like that aren't necessarily safe. And I think this is our first example of that. I also think it's an example of what we saw from the other two candidates at linebacker in Davis and Nate Landman. Landman had a sack. He looked good. Davis looked good, especially he had a critical fourth down stop, a good tackle around the goal line, didn't let him escape. I thought both of those guys looked good. Walker didn't really stand out or make any plays, at least from what I saw. And they made a very swift decision here and moving on from him.
Yeah, I think it's go ahead, Jake.
Oh, sorry. I was just going to say, shout out Mykal Walker. He was a follower of the site. Good dude. Happy for him. I think he's going to land somewhere 100%. I think they cut him early on in this process, probably out of respect, in a sense that he would have made it a lot longer. But it's like, hey, we know you're going to catch on somewhere. He'll be totally fine. They're going to find a spot for him. I'm happy for him wherever he goes. He's a good dude.
Yeah, the timing is very obvious. That's exactly right. They cut him so that he had an opportunity to land somewhere else and make another 53. And that's just that's what this new regime is going to do. Obviously, they want to put the organization first, but the player is right behind the organization. That's just how this regime operates, and I like it like that. As for Mykal Walker, the writing was kind of on the wall last year. I mean, he did not look good last year in a full-time role. He began the year as a starter next to Rashaan Evans. And before the season was over, he had lost his starting job to Troy Anderson, who did not look good when he played. So that just tells you what Mykal Walker was like. And he mostly struggled in the pass game. I think quarterbacks had like a near perfect passer rating when targeting Mykal Walker in coverage. But I think it is a little surprising because he has plenty of value on special teams. And, in terms of experience as an actual starting linebacker, he had by far the most out of the backups. But it just goes to show this regime doesn't care. If you don't have what it takes, it doesn't matter where you were drafted, how much you're getting paid. It does not matter. And I think that's a signal to a lot of other guys, a lot of other fringe roster guys. I mentioned Jalen Mayfield. His roster spot is in jeopardy, but I think he's going to make it just purely because the depth along the offensive line is just non-existent. Adi Ogundeji is another guy to watch out for. He could be in jeopardy of losing his roster spot. And I kind of like it, though. I appreciate the fact that it doesn't matter who you are, what your name is. This regime doesn't care. It doesn't care who you came from. It's a new regime. Everybody's got a blank slate, and Mykal Walker just didn't prove worthy.
Yeah, I mean, you talk about experience. Mykal Walker has more experience than Troy Anderson and Caden Ellis combined as a starter. So, there's not a lot of experience in that linebacking room, and that's why it was surprising to me. I thought, he's probably going to make the roster simply because of that experience, simply because he's been around. But like you said, I mean, Ryan Nielsen, this is the new guy. He's got the guys that he wants, and hey, I mean, I know you talk about him all the time, Nate Landman, who was an undrafted free agent, but I mean, that guy looks like a player, man. He looked like a player last year in spurts, and he looked like a guy who could legitimately make this 53-man roster. And I think a spot's now opened up for him, and the opportunity's right there. He has a good preseason. He plays like he did in week 1 of the preseason. I think he's going to make this roster right out of preseason.
Yeah, he was flying around. Like I said, my buddy, he used to be on staff at Colorado, and whenever we picked up Landman, he was like, dude, y'all got a dog. He's like, a lot of people don't know about this guy. If you don't know, I've told the story before. Apparently, very interesting backstory. Guy was born in Africa. He has a huge, I can't remember exactly which country it is, but it's like a lion. He has this insane piece on his bicep. You can see it on the field. But he said dude's just a tackling machine. I think he was like top 5 in college football tackles the year before he came into the NFL. And like I said, we saw he had a sack. I think he had the first sack in the preseason for anybody. And it's interesting to see somebody like that, they're probably pretty low on the odds to have the first sack in the preseason.
Yeah, definitely. I think I wouldn't go as far as to say it's a lock by any means, but I mean, he looks like the clear-cut LB3 right now. I mean, Tay Davis might be right there LB4, LB3 right there. But where he's gonna, separate himself like every backup ever across his league is obviously his ability to contribute as a reserve, but more importantly on special teams, and that's where he separates himself.
Yeah, it's exciting to see because it's just another testament to the depth that we talked about in the last piece. I mean, there was no scenario over the last 2 seasons where we're talking about Mykal Walker, and linebacker is a place where we've talked about, like, if there was not a lot of depth, this was it. And so it shows you that they have a lot of confidence in these other guys, and there's competition everywhere, and it's a different feel. It's positive momentum. I'm telling you, this team, like, if Desmond Ridder can just not suck, if he can just not suck, I'll be super happy. I was kind of disappointed we didn't get to see him in week 1, but we'll get to see him in week 2. Coming up after the break, we got a lot of talk about Pascal Siakam, but what about Paul George? We got a mock trade for Paul George.